He always wore long sleeves, even in summer, even when lifting heavy boxers in the stockroom that left other employees drenched in sweat. The other workers joked about it, called him old school, but nobody asked questions. Until the robbery attempt, when his sleeve tore during the struggle, and everyone saw the faded trident tattoo that only one kind of warrior earns. And suddenly, 3 armed men realized they'd picked the wrong store. Welcome to Forgotten Voices. Before we dive into this powerful tale of silence, skill, and unexpected heroism, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us make sure they're never forgotten. The fluorescent lights of Miller's grocery hummed their endless tune, casting that familiar blue-white glow over aisles that had seen the same routine for 12 years straight. Every morning at 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes before his shift officially started, David Chen would push through the employee entrance, clock in without a word, and disappear into the maze of shelves that had become his world. Nobody knew his last name until they checked the schedule. On paper, he was just stock associate David. No fanfare, no backstory, just a man who moved through the store like a ghost with purpose. He wore the same uniform every day: navy blue work shirt, dark pants, black steel-toed boots that never squeaked against the polished floor, and always, in every season, through scorching July heat waves and mild October afternoons, he wore the same long-sleeved work shirt underneath. The fabric was faded gray, worn soft from years of washing but never torn, never stained. It covered his arms completely, from wrist to shoulder, like a second skin. He'd never learned to shed. David moved with a precision that the other employees had stopped noticing years ago. When he stocked shelves, every can faced forward, every label aligned. When he counted inventory, his numbers were always exact. When customers asked questions, his answers came in 3 words or less. Aisle 4, left. Customer service desk. We're out today. The younger employees had theories. Jessica, who worked the afternoon checkout, thought he was just shy. Some people don't like attention, she'd say. Marcus, who handled the produce section, figured David had social anxiety. Guy probably just wants to do his job and go home. But Sarah, the night manager who'd been there almost as long as David, had always sensed something different. It wasn't shyness, it wasn't anxiety, it was control. The way David's eyes swept the store when he thought nobody was looking. The way he positioned himself near exits during busy hours. The way his hands, when he thought nobody could see, would unconsciously check his pockets, as if confirming something was still there. And then there was the long-sleeve question. Every summer, when the air conditioning struggled against the humidity, and even the walk-in freezer felt like a relief, David would be there in his gray long-sleeve shirt, lifting 50-pound cases of canned goods like they weighed nothing, never once rolling up his sleeves, never once showing even a glimpse of the skin beneath. Don't you ever get hot? Sarah had asked him once, during a particularly brutal August heat wave. David had paused, a case of tomato sauce balanced on his shoulder, and given her that look he always gave when someone ventured into personal territory. Not unfriendly, just distant habit, he'd said, and that was the end of the conversation. Tonight was different, though. Tuesday, October 15th, 10:47 p.m., 13 minutes before closing time. The store was nearly empty, just Sarah at the customer service counter, David doing his final inventory check in aisle 7, and Tom, the store manager, in his back office, buried in the day's paperwork. The automatic doors slid open with their familiar whoosh, letting in a gust of cool autumn air. Sarah looked up from her closing checklist, expecting to see a last-minute customer grabbing milk or bread. Instead, she saw 3 men in dark clothing. The first one was tall, maybe 6'2", wearing a black baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. His jacket was zipped to the chin, despite the mild weather. The second was shorter, stockier, carrying a gym bag that looked too heavy for workout clothes. The third lingered by the entrance, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the store with the mechanical precision of someone counting exits. Something was wrong. Sarah felt it before she understood it. A chill that had nothing to do with the open doors. The tall man approached the counter, his footsteps deliberate against the linoleum. When he was close enough that Sarah could see the tension in his jaw, he reached into his jacket. The gun appeared like a magic trick. 1 second his hand was empty. The next second Sarah was staring down the barrel of a black pistol. Nobody moves. Nobody gets hurt, he said, his voice steady, but carrying an edge that made Sarah's blood freeze. This is a robbery. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Her hands went up automatically, trembling as they rose. Behind the counter, her legs felt weak, but somehow she managed to stay standing. You, the gunman pointed at her with his free hand. All the money from the register. The second man had moved to the customer service area, his gym bag unzipped to reveal another weapon. The third remained by the doors, now clearly standing guard. Sarah's fingers fumbled for the register keys. The numbers on the display blurred. As tears formed in her eyes, she tried to remember the code, the same code she'd used hundreds of times, but her mind was blank, wiped clean by terror. I can single quotes T ... double quotes, she whispered. I can't remember ... Try harder, the tall man said, his voice dropping to something more dangerous. That's when they heard it. A voice from aisle7.com, and evening. All three men turned toward the sound. David emerged from behind the cereal display, moving with that same unhurried pace he always used, his hands visible, his expression neutral. To the gunman, he looked exactly like what they'd expected to find. An older employee, maybe in his 50s, thin but not weak, with graying hair and the kind of quiet demeanor that suggested he'd rather avoid confrontation. "Stay where you are, old man," the leader commanded, swinging his gun toward David. David stopped walking but didn't retreat. "Not looking for trouble," he said. "Just want to help the girl with the register. She's scared. I know the codes." The gunman studied him for a moment. This wasn't part of the plan, but an older employee who could open the register faster. That was actually helpful. "Fine, but no sudden moves. Try anything stupid, and both of you end up on the floor." David nodded once and took a step toward the counter, then another. His movements were careful, deliberate, but there was something else underneath, a kind of awareness that the gunman didn't recognize. As he approached the register, David's eyes flicked to the security camera above the door. Red light off. The system was down for its weekly reset. No recording. His gaze shifted to the positions of the three men: leader at the counter, guard at the door, middleman covering the customer service area. Standard robbery formation, but sloppy. Too much distance between them. Too confident. David reached the register and placed his hand on the keypad. "Just need to input the override code," he said to Sarah, his voice gentle. "You're doing fine." But instead of typing numbers, David was calculating distances. Leader, 6 feet, weapon, drawn but pointed down. Guard, 30 feet, focused on the entrance. Middleman, 15 feet, partially obscured by a display rack. "Hurry up," the leader said, raising his gun again. That's when David saw it. The subtle shift in the man's grip. The way his finger moved from the guard to the trigger. This wasn't just about money anymore. These men weren't planning to leave witnesses. David's hand moved to the register, but not to open it. Instead, he pressed the silent alarm button hidden beneath the cash drawer. No sound, no light, just a signal to the local police station that would bring help in about 8 minutes. Too long. "Having trouble with the code?" David said. "Buying time? System's being slow tonight. Stop stalling," the gunman snapped. "Open it now," or David moved. What happened next unfolded in the space between seconds. Faster than thought, but precise as clockwork. David's left hand shot out and grabbed the gunman's wrist, twisting it upward and away from Sarah in one fluid motion. His right hand came up under the man's elbow, hyperextending the joint with surgical precision. The gun fired once into the ceiling tiles. The sound explosive in the confined space? But the weapon was already falling, clattering across the floor. As the gunman's nerveless fingers released it, David didn't stop there. Using the momentum from the wrist grab, he spun the leader around and drove his knee into the man's solar plexus. The gunman doubled over, gasping for air that wouldn't come. But during the struggle, David's gray work shirt caught on the metal edge of the register display. The fabric tore with a sharp ripping sound, splitting from shoulder to elbow, and that's when everyone saw it. On David's exposed forearm, inked in black lines that had faded but never disappeared, was a trident. Not the decorative kind you'd find in a tattoo parlor, but the real thing, the Budweiser, the seal trident. Below it, in smaller script, the words Team 6. Sarah's gasp was audible, even over the sound of the second gunman's approaching footsteps. David glanced down at his torn sleeve, then back up at the chaos around him. For just a moment, his expression shifted. The quiet grocery store employee disappeared, replaced by something harder, more focused. The second gunman had drawn his weapon and was raising it toward David when David moved again. He grabbed a can of tomato sauce from the nearby same brand he'd been stocking for 12 years, and hurled it with the precision of a pitcher throwing a strike. The can hit the gunman's wrist at exactly the right angle to send his weapon spinning away. Before the man could recover, David was there, moving across the 15 feet of space faster than should have been possible for someone his age. The takedown was textbook military: control the threat, neutralize the weapon, subdue without permanent damage. The second gunman hit the floor face first, David's knee between his shoulder blades, his arm twisted behind his back in a way that made resistance impossible. The third man by the door was smarter than his partners. Instead of trying to fight, he turned to run. He made it 3 steps. David was somehow there, first. Moving around the end cap display like he'd teleported, his arm came across the runner's chest in a clothesline that would have made a linebacker proud. The man went down hard, skidding across the polished floor. 3 minutes. That's how long it took from the first gunshot to the last gunman hitting the ground. 3 minutes to transform from David the quiet stock clerk to something else entirely. As the adrenaline faded, David stood in the middle of the store, breathing hard but controlled. His torn sleeve hung loose, the seal trident visible to anyone who looked. Around him, 3 would-be robbers lay groaning on the floor, their weapons scattered and harmless. Sarah was still behind the counter, her hands pressed to her mouth, staring at the tattoo like it was something from another world. "You, double quotes," she whispered. You're a Navy SEAL. David looked down at his exposed arm, then back at her. He said, his voice returning to that familiar quiet tone. Long time ago, but you, Sarah gestured at the men on the floor. You just, muscle. Memory, David said simply. He walked over to where the guns had fallen, carefully kicking them further away from the groaning men. Some things you don't forget. That's when Tom burst through the office door, alerted by the gunshot. His eyes took in the scene. 3 men on the floor. David standing over them with a torn shirt, Sarah white-faced behind the counter. What the hell happened here? David adjusted his torn sleeve, trying to cover the tattoo. Robbery attempt. Police are on the way. Tom's eyes fell on the exposed trident. He'd seen enough military documentaries to recognize it. David, are you, was David repeated. Not anymore. The police arrived 6 minutes later, just as David had calculated. The paramedics came next, checking the gunman for serious injuries. None were found. David had been precise in his takedowns, using exactly enough force and no more. Detective Rodriguez took statements, starting with Sarah, then Tom, and finally David. The questioning was routine for the first 2 witnesses. But when she got to David, Rodriguez's tone changed. Military background, she asked, looking at his still exposed tattoo. 15 years. Navy, David said. Retired in 2011. SEAL Team 6. Yes, ma'am. Rodriguez studied him for a long moment. You know, we've been having problems with armed robberies in this area. This is the 4th attempt this month, but this is the first time the suspects were subdued by store personnel. David didn't respond. You could have been killed, Rodriguez continued. These men had loaded weapons. Yes, ma'am, David said, but they didn't know how to use them properly. After the police left and the crime scene tape was removed, David and Sarah found themselves alone in the store. It was after midnight, now, well past closing time, but neither of them had moved to leave. Can I ask you something? Sarah said finally. David nodded. How long were you a SEAL? Enlisted at 18. Made it through Bud S on my 2nd try. 15 years of active duty. Iraq, Afghanistan, and places I can't tell you about. Why did you leave? David was quiet for a long moment, looking at the spot where the first gunman had fallen. You know what the hardest part of being a SEAL is? He said finally. Sarah shook her head. It's not the training. It's not the missions. It's coming home and trying to be normal again. Trying to pretend that stocking shelves matters as much as saving lives. But you've been here for 12 years, Sarah said. Why stay? David smiled for the first time she could remember. Because normal matters too. Because someone has to keep the world running while other people are out there fighting to protect it. He looked down at his torn sleeve, at the tattoo that was now visible for anyone to see. Guess that's over now, David, Sarah said quietly. Why did you hide it? You're a hero. People would respect you if they knew. Heroes don't need recognition, David said. They just need to do the job. The next morning, David showed up for work as usual, but instead of his long-sleeved gray shirt, he wore a short-sleeved polo. The SEAL trident was visible on his forearm, faded but unmistakable. Word had spread overnight. The other employees looked at him differently now, not with pity or curiosity, but with something approaching awe. Customers who had passed him in the aisles for years without a second glance now nodded respectfully. When they saw him, Tom approached him during his first break. David, the manager said. Corporate called this morning. They're recommending you for a Civilian Heroism Award. David was restocking the soup aisle, his movements as precise as always. Not necessary, he said. Also, Tom continued, there's going to be some media attention. Local news wants to do a story. David's hands paused on a can of chicken noodle soup. I'd prefer not. I figured, Tom said. I told them you declined to comment. Thank you. Tom watched David work for a moment. Can I ask you something? Of course. Last night, when those men came in, were you scared? David considered the question. No, he said finally, but not because I'm brave. Because I was trained. Fear is just information. You process it, you use it, and you act. And the tattoo? Tom gestured to David's exposed arm. You're not hiding it anymore. David looked down at the trident, figured there wasn't much point. Besides, he smiled slightly. Maybe it's time people knew that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear name tags. That afternoon, an elderly customer named Mrs. Patterson approached David while he was organizing the cereal aisle. She was a regular, had been shopping there for almost as long as David had been working there. Young man, she said, and David almost smiled at being called young at 53. I heard about what happened last night. David nodded but didn't stop working. My grandson is in the Navy, Mrs. Patterson continued. Basic training right now. He wants to be a SEAL. Now David did stop, turning to face her fully. Tell him, David said, that being a SEAL isn't about being tough. It's about being smart. And it's about never giving up, even when giving up makes sense. Mrs. Patterson smiled. I will, and Mr. David. Yes, ma'am, thank you, for your service. And for last night. David nodded once. Just doing my job, ma'am. As the weeks passed, David settled into a new routine. He still stocked shelves, still counted inventory, still answered customer questions with the same economy of words. But now, when young employees asked him about military life, he'd take a moment to answer. When veterans shopped at the store and recognized his tattoo, he'd exchange a quiet nod of understanding. The long sleeves never came back. The tattoo remained visible, a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary-looking people carry the most extraordinary stories, and that real heroes don't need to announce themselves, they just show up, do the work, and keep the world a little bit safer, one shift at a time. Sarah never forgot that night. Years later, when she told the story to friends, she'd always end it the same way: I thought I knew him. Turns out, I'd been working next to a legend for 12 years and never knew it. Makes you wonder who else is out there, hiding in plain sight. So I ask you, have you ever encountered someone like David? Someone who seemed ordinary on the surface but carried an extraordinary past. Someone who never asked for recognition, never sought the spotlight, but who would step up when it mattered most. Share their name in the comments. Tell us their story, because real heroes live among us every day. We just have to be wise enough to look beyond the surface and see them for who they really are. Thank you for watching Forgotten Voices. If this story moved you, subscribe and help us honor those who served in silence and continue to serve in their own quiet way. We'll see you in the next story. And remember, the next time you're in a grocery store, look a little closer at the person stocking the shelves. You might be standing next to a legend.